Welcome to Dream Big. I'm Tom, once again, and today we're talking about compost. You can see behind me, I have my great start on compost. So one of the things that I have done is I talked with a local tree trimming company, and as they run around trimming for the power lines, I had them drop off as much wood chips as they would give me. So wood chips, wood, is a carbon base. So there's a recipe for building compost, and it can vary depending on kind of who you ask, but standard guidelines are anywhere from 1 to 20 or 1 to as high as even 60. So 1 to 30, 1 to 40 is a great medium there. That's kind of the recipe that I'm going to use. So 1 being 1 nitrogen, 40 meaning carbons. So 1 nitrogen for every 40 carbon is how you build your compost to keep it so your compost doesn't stink and your compost can stay active. So there's little bugs in there, they run around, they're munching away on the carbon, and then they cannot eat any more carbon until they eat a nitrogen. And then they eat some more carbon, and then they have to eat a nitrogen. As these bugs, and not necessarily bugs, but bacteria and everything else that's in there that decomposes material, as that's in there, what it does is it starts to generate nitrogen to a point, and it starts to break down the cellulose and all the other materials that you build into your compost and makes it bioavailable for plants. There's one more step, we'll talk about that, and that's putting it through worms. That's a whole nother topic for discussion, but ties right with this, because that's in the grand scheme of things of what we're doing here on our farm is we were actually excuse me, we're going to be worm farmers. So we will use red wiggler worms to compost, and first we do the composting, then we feed the worms, and then we get the worm casting. So like I said, we'll get into that later. Today we're just talking about compost, ingredients for compost, compost turning, temperatures a little bit. We're just going to kind of get into it, just introducing you to the compost side of our farm. So great carbon source, and right here, leaves from your tree in your backyard. One of the greatest sources of nutrients that you will get. Trees store all of the micro and the macro and the other nutrients that they don't store in the cellulose of the dead wood or the center wood of the tree. That's for water storage only, and stability keeps it up. So your composting in your leaves is where they store a lot of the micronutrients. As the syrup or the nectar, not nectar flow, but your sap flow of your tree, as it moves up and down through the seasons of the year. In the spring it all comes up, and that's what builds your leaves. In the winter it all goes to the root and protects itself underground. It keeps the root alive. Everything above ground it doesn't worry about, because it can always push life back up through. So one of the most valuable ingredients you'll ever get right here is leaves for building your compost. Your nitrogen sources can be anything. It can be weeds, it can be chicken manure, cow manure, any type of manure, pigs, you name it. Those are your nitrogen sources. Carbon sources, wood chips, paper, dead weeds, you name any of the cardboard, things like that. So as we get going full cycle, we do have, for the family, we have paper shredding. Little Levi, that's his job, and he shreds all the paper. We have bags and bags of paper as we start to build our compost and our worm beds. We'll get that out once again, and that's a whole nother phase we're going to get into. So we got our recipe going here. As you can see, we have some of our compost agitators here behind us. Right there, pigs, some of the greatest compost turners that you'll ever have. As they go to the bathroom and they poop and they pee in the straw, that generates and creates that nitrogen and the carbon ratio. So that's what we're doing. We keep them well strawed down. Pigs don't stink, and that goes right along with that theory of your composting. Is if you keep your nitrogens and your carbons in the right ratio. So if I keep enough straw in here, my pigs' pens don't stink near as bad as they could. So here's some of our premium compost turners. We clean these beds out, we'll mix it in with some of the other compost and let it do its magic. So back over here to our compost pile. We have compost thermometers. You want to test your compost piles, check them, turn them. So 3 key ingredients they need is the right mix. We've talked about the right mix. The second thing that we need is a little bit of heat. And that's when the depth of your piles actually matters. And the third thing you need is moisture. You gotta have the right moisture content, the right depth in order for the biology to work and do its thing, and you gotta have the correct mix of nitrogen and carbon. So, the deeper your piles are, that's good. You can't get too deep for your piles not to work so long as you're turning them. I take that back. There's 4 things. The fourth one is oxygen. You do need to have a certain amount of oxygen, or in this process, what we're doing is called an aerobic decomposition. And it can go anaerobic, and that's when it starts to stink more because it doesn't have that oxygen. And it's still a style of composting, but it has its pluses, it has its negatives. It has its pros and its cons. And I choose to do the aerobic because it tends to compost faster and it stinks less as you keep the oxygen and the right mix going. So you got to turn your pile. We don't have this one mixed yet. This is just our base. And as we get our nitrogens, we're going to start building our compost piles. This will still compost somewhat as it's just sitting here. So mixing our ratios, turning it, and giving it the oxygen it needs, the moisture it needs, keeping everything mixed at the appropriate ratios for your nitrogen carbons. Composting is what brings the life to the soil. Composting makes soil. Soil is made up of dirt. Dirt is not soil. Soil is made up of dirt and organic material, and that's what we're working on here. So you can kind of see behind me, got this big open area. This will be the garden. And yes, we have a lot of material to build. So I've been getting some dirt from the local farmers through their potato harvest. I'll be adding that with my compost that we build. And once again, a whole nother video is the farm garden that we'll have here. This year or next year, depending on how things work out, we're working on putting 2 big greenhouses in the garden to have that year-round food supply. We'll have the perfect grow media to put in greenhouses as we work through our composting worms. Once again, we'll get to that, cover that as we start to build. Like I've said in some of our other videos, we've recently purchased a place, so yep, there's a lot that needs to be done. We just wanted to kind of walk through and show and share our journey as we take the diamond in the rough that we have here and make it our dream. We have big dreams. We want a family farm, and this is what we're doing. Thanks for joining me. Remember, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Share with your friends and family. Hope you enjoyed the videos. Send some comments, constructive criticism, you name it. Ideas, things you might want to hear about, have questions we can answer. But I'm Tom. Appreciate your time. Had fun. Look forward to the next video. Thanks.